I'm Joshua Brustein. I'm a reporter and editor at Bloomberg News, and we are going to talk about real-time data with three people from three companies who are working in the field. We have Neha Narkhede, the co-founder, chief technical officer, and chief product officer of Confluent. Benoit Dageville, the co-founder and president of products at Snowflake. And Alexis Lê-Quôc, the co-founder and chief technical officer of Datadog. So I thought a good way to start this conversation off would be just to hear a little bit about kind of how you all got started on your particular ventures. I think that gives a good framing for kind of where this transformation started and where we are now. And Neha, I wanted to start with you. You had an interesting story about how when you first started looking into what became Confluent, you were working at LinkedIn, and you had a very different way of handling data. So I thought maybe you could set the stage for us there and then kind of take us away.
Sure. So, Kafka started about 10 years ago at LinkedIn. This is LinkedIn circa 2009. It was probably smaller than Confluent is today, about 500 employees. And our big problem was that the website, the product, was used 24/7 in real time by millions of users. But the fastest way that we could use all that data, the way LinkedIn software got access to all that, to customize user experience, to make decisions on the fly, was once a day at midnight. And that was basically way too slow. And LinkedIn was trying to become data-driven. And when we started on the problem, there was no other technology that did real-time at scale that way. So we simply had to start fresh. And that's when we created Kafka, which is something that allows every company in the world to get access to data in real time and process it and make decisions in real time. We open sourced it right after it became popular at LinkedIn, and because the whole hypothesis was that every company would want to do this as you digitize the company. And we were right. Initially, all the tech companies in the valley started to re-architect around Kafka. Then it made its way into the enterprise. And today, it's used by tens of thousands of companies globally. It's the second most active Apache project, and about 60% of Fortune 100 companies use Kafka as a fundamental technology data paradigm. Confluent was started 5 years ago, right after we started getting calls from enterprises to help them for free. So we thought there's a business here, and 5 years down the line, we're worth a little more than $2.5 billion and growing quickly.
Okay, great. And Benoit, how about you? How did Snowflake?
So I guess the start was the same. This nightly, batch that you load that you describe. I'm coming from a slightly different domain, which is data warehousing. And it's the same thing, right? Data warehousing was very rigid and didn't have a lot of resources. So you had to do this nightly TL batch, and of course you didn't get real time. So in 2012, we decided, Thierry Criones and myself, to found Snowflake. And the goal was to completely reinvent data warehousing for the cloud and leverage the cloud and the elasticity of the cloud to make this problem much more fluid and to really get resources when you need it. And we develop a very different architecture. So the warehouse world is single cluster. You have this single cluster where you put all your data and you have to run all your workload at the same place and they contend for resources. So with Snowflake, what we decided to do is to decouple storage and compute, and such that you can instantly leverage cloud to allocate resources, pool of resources. We call that a virtual warehouse. To run individual workload, and you can size this pool of resources based on the demand of your workload, and you can get a lot of resources to run your workload faster. And what is magic in the cloud is that if you run faster, you use resources for less time. So you can use a lot of resources for less time, and the price is exactly the same, because in the cloud you rent. And that's the magic, is running faster for the same cost. And not only that, but because we separated compute and storage, you can run as many workloads like that with their own pool of resources, so they don't contend for resources. It's really self-service, and real time is about getting access to resources when you need it, and that's the model for Confluent and Kafka, and it's the same for the data warehouse systems. When you need to do something, you have resources. You can get a lot of resources, do your thing, really fast. And when you don't use the system anymore, you don't pay. You can shut down these resources and stop using them. And that's the magic of the cloud. It can adapt, to spike in workload and really amortize, this compute demand. So this is what we built in 2012, and since then, Snowflake has grown a lot, and we have a rapid adoption. Of course, it's fueled by the move to the cloud, and every enterprise now is moving to the cloud to take advantage of these capabilities.
And so at Datadog, we started about 9.5 years ago, and I think we came from we came at the problem from a different route. We kind of took the age-old problem of monitoring. You have enterprises, you have a lot of software that's running to keep the business functioning and growing, and then how do you know that when something's broken, how do you know what to fix? And so what we did is we thought about monitoring in the context of the cloud. Like that, one of our premises was that, well, the cloud's going to change how monitoring is actually needs to be done. So when we got started, we really we thought about monitoring as a sort of, what does it look like in a cloud-native environment? And the other thing we recognize is, monitoring used to be a very traditional sort of ops problem that certain people, the ops teams would focus about, and developers would not want to touch it. And we thought that was going to change because of the cloud. Because again, sort of cloud adoption means developers can actually get involved in the speccing and the running of applications at scale very early on. So when we did that, we started in 2010, 2012, we go to market. We have a sort of cloud-native monitoring product, and what we did is we gave two developers APIs so that they can start measuring things. So initially, and I used to be a developer. I wish I were one, but I don't get a chance to code anymore. But initially, you kind of measure things that speak to you as an individual. How if I write this particular piece of function, I'm gonna see how often it's called, when it. How often it succeeds, how often it fails. And then everybody in the company start to do that. All the developers start to do that, which you have this emergent behavior of you're starting to instrument the business, especially as you're going through a digital transformation where more and more of the business happens effectively online. Developers effectively start to instrument everything at every single layer, to the point now where the same product that is used to measure how many CPU cycles are used somewhere, in the data center, is used to measure, for instance, one of our transportation customers in the ride-hailing business, in a given city, how many rides in real time are succeeding or abandoned or finishing or starting. So we've moved from measuring something really deep down, in the stack, in the bowels of the beast, as it were, to measuring something that's really critical to the business. So what that means for us as Datadog is we see our dashboards, our alerts, they still are out in display in software engineers team, but also make their way into executive rooms effectively, where the CEO of that ride-hailing company has a dashboard that says, well, this is how the business is doing in real time. And so that's how effective we got from monitoring, which was something that, a bit more of a niche area in the grand scheme of things, to real-time analytics, which I think has a much more transverse, much more appeal, much broader appeal.
Yeah, I think this is an interesting point where something that was sort of a technical task, where you thought, this data, we just need to make sure these systems run well. In the task of figuring out how to make those systems run well, you realize, no, this information that we've been gathering, for one use or another, actually has a far broader use. And it seems like that's kind of one of the underlying revelations that powers the need for products like kind of all of the products for the companies on stage. And I'm just wondering kind of how else you guys have experienced that transformation in how clients want to use the data that they end up with.
Yeah, I think the best way to understand how people use it is to look at use cases, right? And interestingly enough, I just want to continue on the use case Alexis mentioned, which is ride-sharing services, right? So gone are the days when you call someone for a taxi cab. Now, if you open your Lyft app, the thing that shows you where your car is in your ETA is powered by Kafka. And not only that, you swipe a credit card, your fraud detection happens using Kafka. You go to Netflix, your movie recommendations are powered by Kafka. So I think the reason this is happening is real time is no longer sort of hidden away in a part of your business, right? And that happened because the technology is forced you to sort of use it only in pockets of the business. You could never imagine your entire business at your fingertips. You're sort of used to the dashboards that are available once a day at midnight. And I think this is happening because every company is becoming a software company. It's actually part of a much broader trend, which is every single company, whether it's car companies, your Audi car, sends sensor data to track driver safety in real time. So this is part of a broader trend, which we say digitization, but I actually just think as businesses becoming software in and of it themselves.
I mean, ride-hailing is such a sort of obvious use case for the need of real-time data. Like the car has to be there. You can't wait for batch processing overnight. But how deeply does this extend where there's businesses that maybe aren't as obviously in need of minute-to-minute data, data analysis or even access? Is this every company now, or?
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of use cases. I mean, another one, which is not, maybe second latency, but maybe minutes, at the most minutes, is security analytics. We have a lot of customers, putting all their data. So Snowflake, since we built it from scratch, one big use case is big data and machine-generated data at high volume. So you can store them in. So what customers are doing is they are streaming data in, potentially using Kafka, in Snowflake, and then they run their analytics and their rules and their security rules on these web logs and all these different sources of data, and they detect, breaches or misconfiguration, really in real time. And that has to be at most minutes, and sometime, a human is going to intervene, but still, they don't want to wait, many hours. So security analytics is a big domain. Retailer and giving, recommendations about, what you are going to buy and what you should buy, or, advertisement placements is also something that needs, more real time, because you don't want some advice based on data that was collected long time ago. So we are used to this, real time interaction as human being, and the system has to adapt to that real timeness.
Yeah, security is a really compelling point. I'm wondering for Alexis and Neha, like how vulnerable do the companies that you're working with feel to this constant threat of intrusion or breach? And does that end up being a significant part of the conversations you're having with potential clients?
Absolutely. I think security is one part of the problem, right? Which is just, how soon do you know something bad is happening in the business, right? And that has sort of extended to everything happening in your business. Is, to riff on his example, retail companies are being disrupted, right? And they're being disrupted because they can't do dynamic pricing. You can't do dynamic pricing if you don't know the state of your inventory. And so that is just how deeply this problem applies across every company in the world, is they just need to know what's happening in the business in real time. It's not enough, to figure out if a problem happened, a couple hours later when you've lost millions, potentially billions at a time, right? So I actually think it is the problem of security itself, which is obvious. We need to do it in real time, and there are systems like Snowflake, and I'm pretty sure Datadog is used to monitor what is going wrong with it, and Kafka is used to collect all the sensor data to be able to process all that data in real time and alert on top of it. But that problem actually extends to all the data in the business if you want to be able to respond to competitive trends happening around you.
Yeah, I think for us, I think security is one aspect. To what Neha was saying is, it is the disruption of the flow that is the key problem. So security could be one reason why the flow is disrupted, but it's not the only one. And there can be different treatment. If you identify it's a security issue, but in the main, that's one class, and you can't, I think, over-index to. Well, we're only going to kind of worry about security incidents. You have to have a much more, I think, comprehensive view of what is a threat to the continuity of the business from a second by second, and could be anything, right? Could be disruption, upstream with a supplier somewhere. There's all these micro decisions you have to the enterprise has to make sure that the service is properly delivered. That's I think key. That's what all of us here, we're trying to bring a solution to help companies figure out how do I stay up and running and how do I grow.
And so give me a sense of where along this transformation you think we are. Obviously, we're a long way from where we were in 2012 when the sort of worlds that you guys were describing, was a completely different way of handling data. I'm assuming that you don't think we're kind of like there yet, but are we halfway there? Are we 3/4 of the way there? Are we 10% of the way there?
I think it's hard to put a number on where we are, but it is a beginning. I would say we're in the first quartile of this journey. And when I say we, I mean the most traditional companies in the world, because there are obviously companies that started off as digital companies. Everything is monitored from the get-go in real time. But now there are brick and mortar companies transforming themselves, and that's what we hear as digitization. But what it looks like at its, sort of full use is that the company has a central nervous system for all the company's data, right? And that is really what Kafka becomes in a company a couple years down the line. But that's not how you start, right? You start with one of the use cases. Let's say you want to do fraud detection in real time, but then you want to be able to do customer 360 in real time, and you want to be able to give a mobile app experience in real time. And so it sort of naturally starts with one particular application, but it's definitely part of a broader trend where companies need a central nervous system where you can monitor all the impulses, everything happening, all the events happening in the business in real time, and actually make decisions and provide customer experiences. And I think this is part of a broader trend, which we now call sort of consumerization of the IT industry, which is essentially extends to customer expectations. Customer expectations have fundamentally changed, right? You expect mobile-first experiences, you expect real-time experiences, and I'm the same person in the company, and I want to be able to, use the Capital One app the same exact way. And so that's what Capital One does using Confluent, is to provide that real-time experience. And I think that's going to change how we also build products. If you go to Snowflake or Datadog or Confluent, you will see a very consumery product experience. That's also changing how we build the product itself, not only how customers want to use it.
Yeah. No, I just wanted to add something on moving. So the really the big revolution is the cloud, and the cloud enables all these use cases. And what is interesting is generally companies are moving to the cloud first, initially because of cost. They heard that they don't want to manage data center, they want to remove all this cost, and they think about cost when initially they move to the cloud. And then you see them starting to use, systems like Snowflake or Confluent, getting more real time, and they start to do, things that they were doing in a much better way. And that's the second, level of transformation. They see that they are improving on what they had on premise. And the third one is really the transformation part, which is the things that they were not even dreaming about doing. They can do that. And that's what we see with customers, with many of our customers. They really started to adopt Snowflake just because of reduction of cost. And now they are, transformed by many aspects of the system. The elasticity, as I say, data sharing is another big aspect of Snowflake, getting data from outside or sharing data with other tenants of the platform. So anyway, the movement to the cloud is very interesting because it allows this transformation, which to me is fascinating because you have the impression that we really created something different and new.
Neha, you said something interesting, which is, I think, an interesting way about how these technologies are being adopted by companies. And that's that they're not necessarily like clients are making like a decision, like one day they're doing one thing, then they give you a call, and the next day they've moved over, to Confluent or whatever. And I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit, and I think Alexis had talked a little bit about this as well, about how products like yours are making it into companies, maybe little by little, as opposed to like all at once.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting question because right in front of my eyes, I've seen sort of the whole technology buying process flipped on its head, right? And what I mean by flipped on its head is gone are the days where big technology decisions are made top down. With a bottom-up buy-in. Now it's exactly the opposite, where developer is the new buyer. They're making the decisions on the ground, and then at some point you need top-down buy-in to probably bring a Confluent in the door or a Snowflake in the door to kind of help the business expand. And I think that's happening, of course, because open source and SaaS freemium models are kind of really making it easy for developers to try new things and to solve those problems in entirely new ways. And before you know it, it's in production and it's used in a pretty massive way at a point where companies need to come to enterprises to say, well, how can you help us get to the next stage of adoption, right? And that's where companies like us come in, is at the right point in the journey where we're not talking about how you should use this or why it's valuable. We're talking about how we can help you get to the next stage, whether it is in the public cloud or sort of in production, monitoring and management of the system, or what have you.
Yeah, I think for us it's a similar motion. I would echo that. So we're in a SaaS, which means it is easy to try us, our service, our platform, and then we've seen the same thing. It's literally a land and expand motion where we'll start with a team, a couple of teams, a department, and then it's a fairly the community of developers, for instance, communicates fast, and so the kind of best practices go from one to the other, and yes, at some point, it could be anywhere from from a procurement standpoint, it's like, oh, we have 5 different accounts at Datadog, can we consolidate and rationalize, to building really the buy-in at the from a top down, to kind of help companies think about, as you're thinking about your digital transformation, migration to the cloud being one of the aspects, what is your monitoring analytics story? So that's where we come in to also kind of help company figure out adoption to the next level, rationalization, because the land and expand, the beauty of land and expand, of course, it's a very efficient model. What you have to watch for is give companies a sense of a rational adoption of the platform, like anything else. So this is also where we come in. But it's the transfer of power, in a sense, from the classical IT procurement centers to the developers. Yeah, it's been something over the last 20 years that's been amazing.
Great. I think that seems like a great setup for another poll question. I know you guys have been doing this throughout the day. So the question we're interested in is, how well prepared is your company to use real-time data streams? And that would be from very well to well, fairly, poorly, or not at all. I'm going to give you guys a couple of minutes to do that. And while you do, I was wondering from the panelists, just as you're talking to potential clients, maybe making a shift for the first time, like what are the major barriers that you see towards adoption, or the major challenges that companies you're talking to are facing right now?
I think for us, what we get to see is, as Alexis mentioned, we come in when you've already made the decision, or some team in your company is already using Kafka. And sometimes we come in and we actually introduce you to other teams in your same company that are also using Kafka. That happens fairly often, but the thing is, Kafka is a distributed system. So it's easy to get started with, but a couple months, years down the line, you actually need help to operate it, right? So what we do is we really focus on operationalization, right? How can we make it easy to run? And to that effect, in the public cloud, we've built a fully managed service, and we've made Kafka serverless, which essentially means cloud native. So you don't have to think about machines and brokers, and you can just think about building your application, and it scales from 0 to hundreds of megabytes per second, and you just have to do nothing other than use the service and let Confluent do our thing. So really making sort of that journey simple from your first steps to all the way, scaling to meet all your needs, and helping you turn it into a central platform is really where the roadblocks are. Is how do you get companies to have a center of excellence, and how do you get companies to have a central team and train them and help them use it at larger scale?
Yeah, and for Snowflake, it's a little bit different, of course, because we are a data warehouse system, so this system existed on premise. So our challenge is moving from on premise to Snowflake. The good thing for us is that we are fully a service. So as Neha was saying, it's really you load your data, you run your queries, and we do everything for you. So you don't need to understand managing the system, tuning, all these things that you had to know when you were managing your system on premise. At the same time, we made sure that we supported all the goodies that a data warehouse system supports, like transactions and best class SQL. So it's very easy to migrate your Teradata and your Oracle on-premise system to Snowflake. But at the same time, there is work to do that. So companies who need to do that, we help them and do this migration to the cloud when they migrate. And then there are new use cases where there it's simpler, it's really organic, as Alexis was mentioning, right, where customers are really starting from Snowflake, and they grow their usage. And we are a utility, right? We are not SaaS. We charge on exactly the compute you use, and that makes the growth easy.
Okay, Alexis, quick thought, because we're about out of time.
Yeah, so I think for me the global context of the context of digital transformation, I think ultimately, you want to have people excited about it, kind of realize what the potential is. The tech, ultimately, you kind of figure it out. That's right. I think that's it. And it's really having realistic expectation and enthusiasm to get there. To me, that's what needs to exist for it to be successful.
Great, and I will just quickly read the results of the poll. It looks like we're about 33% say they're well prepared, 28% say very well, 19% say fairly, 19% say poorly, and 2% say not at all. So you guys have some work to do.
Awesome.
But thank you all. I think this was great.
Yeah, thanks everyone.
Thank you.